Hey, Western Po' Boy Savage of the Derpy Redneck channel. Sorry that the original theme that was used for the intro is no longer being here, but the animation's still here. But yeah, copyright monopoly justifying bollocks fucked me in the ass. Enjoy the show. Here we go, folks. I'm about to read from the book Socialism, an Economic and Sociological Analysis by a classic liberal known as Ludwig von Mises. In the category of pseudo-socialist systems, he talks about syndicalism. From the bottom half of page Now, he does kind of have a J.R.R. Tolkien read a feel to him when he reads, which I find awesome. To me, he does. But you're the judge of this, folks. I'm gonna go ahead and lay down on my comfy bed. Excuse me. No, I won't fall asleep on you. I fall asleep on people in chat too many goddamn times. But let's let you read from Mises himself. Let me do this. Straighten up. I'm not finished with this room. I've got to clean this. Finish cleaning it up. I'm still not through. At least it got better. Fuck. Let me read these pages to you. This talks about a series of arguments and what it is about and how it works, what would happen in it, and all that. Here we go. As political tactics, syndicalism presents a particular method of attack by organized labor for the attainment of their political ends. This may also be the establishment of true socialism. That is to say, socialization of means of production. But the term syndicalism is also used in a second sense, that in which it maintains socio-political aim of a special kind. In the sense that syndicalism is to be understood as a movement whose object is to bring about a state of society which workers are the owners of the means of production. Excuse me. We are concerned here with syndicalism only as an aim. With syndicalism as a movement, as political tactics, we need not deal. So syndicalism as an aim and syndicalism as political tactics do not always go hand in hand. Many groups which have adopted syndicalist direct action and the basis of their proceedings are striving to realize syndicalism as an end can be carried out carried on by methods other than those of violence recommended by Sorel. Yeah, I forgot to mention Georges Sorel. Sorry, I didn't mention him. In the minds of the great bulk of workers who call themselves socialists or communists, syndicalism presents itself at least as vividly as socialism, as the aim of the great revolution. The petty bourgeois ideas which Marx thought to overcome are very widespread even in the ranks of Marxian socialists. You wonder why that happened behind me? There's a pile of clothes inside of there and it's missing 2 drawers. Let's just say I tripped over out of the bed one morning and my head hit against, I made a full head impact again. Then my baby made a hard impact against that and broke both drawers. I've been procrastinating on doing it because I want to get my own C-claps and shit. C-clamps, 2x4 pieces, and pipe clamps to put the drawers together and Gorilla Glue them tightly. or use wood glue of some sort. But anyway, that's what happened over behind me. I was falling out of my bed, stumbling out of my bed, and a full on head first impact. I'm hard-headed. Anyways, let's continue reading. The petty bourgeois ideas that which Marx sought to overcome are very widespread, even in the ranks of Marxian socialists. The great mass desire, not the genuine socialism, that is centralized socialism, but but syndicalism. The worker wishes to be the lord to the means of the means of property. A society could abolish the institution completely without injuring the productivity of labor. If, however, to abolish private property is disadvantageous, then the half abolition is disadvantageous too. The half measure may, in fact, be hardly less destructive than the clean sweep. Advocates usually say that the mixed undertaking leaves the scope for the entrepreneur. However, we have already shown. State or municipal activity hampers the freedom of the entrepreneur's decisions. An undertaking forced to collaborate with the civil servants is not able to realize the means of production in such ways as profit-making demands. As political tactics, socialism presents a particular method of attack by organized labor for the attainment of their political ends. This may also be the establishment of true socialism, that is to say, the socialization of the means of production. But the term syndicalism is also used in the second sense. Whoops, my bad. I'm fucked up. Anyways, accidentally pressed button. The worker wishes to be the lord of the means of production in which are employed in his particular undertaking. The social movement around about us shows more clearly every day that this and nothing else is what the worker desires, in contradistinction to socialism, which is the result of armchair study. Syndicalist ideas spring direct from the mind of the ordinary man, who is always hostile to unearned income obtained by someone else. Sorry about the mix-up there. I thought I was pushed the down key, but shit, I accidentally fucked up. Mixed up my reading. Sorry. Syndicalism, like socialism, aims at the abolition of the separation of worker from the means of production. It proceeds by another method. Not all the workers will become the owners of the means of production. Those in particular industry are undertaking the work of the workers engaged in a complete branch of production will obtain the means of production employed in it. The railways to the railwaymen, the mines to the miners, the factories to the factory hands. This is the slogan. We must ignore every freak scheme for enacting syndicalist ideas and take a thoroughly consistent application for the main principle to the whole economic order as a starting point of our examination. This is not difficult. Every measure which takes ownership of all means of production from the entrepreneurs, capitalists, and landlords without transferring to the whole of citizens the economic area is to be regarded as syndicalism. It makes no difference in this case whether such a society, more or less, of these associations are formed. It is unimportant whether all branches of production are constituted as separate bodies or only as single undertakings. Just as they have evolved historically, or single factories, or even single workshops. In essence, the scheme is hardly affected if the lines drawn through the society are more or less horizontal or vertical. Only decisive point is that the citizen of such community is the owner of a share of certain means of production, and the non-owner of other community and the non-owner of other means of production, and that in some cases, for example, when he is unable to work, he may own no property at all. The question whether the worker's incomes will or will not be noticeably increased is unimportant here. Most workers have absolutely fantastic ideas about the increase of wealth they could expect under syndicalist arrangements of property. They believe that just the mere distribution of the share which landlords, capitalists, and entrepreneurs draw under capitalist industry must considerably increase the income of each of them. Apart from this, they expect an important increase in the product of industry, because they who regard themselves particularly expert will themselves conduct the enterprise because every worker will be personally interested in the property of the undertaking. The worker will no longer work for a stranger, but for himself. The liberal thinks quite differently of all this. He points out that the distribution and rent and profit comes among the workers who bring them an insignificant increase in incomes. Above all, he maintains that the enterprises which are no longer directed by a self-interest of entrepreneurs working on their own account, but by labor leaders unfit for the task, will yield less, so the workers will not only earn no more than under a free economy, but considerably less. If syndicalist reform merely handed over the workers the ownership of the means of production, and left the system of property of the capitalist order otherwise unchanged, the result would be no more than a primitive redistribution of wealth. The redistribution of goods with the object of restoring the equality of property. And wealth is at the back of the mind of the ordinary man whenever he thinks of reforming social conditions. And it forms the basis for all popular proposals for socialization. This is not incompatible in the case of land workers, whom the object of ambition is to acquire a homestead and a piece of land large enough to support him and his family. In the village, redistribution of popular solution to the social problem. It's quite conceivable. In industry, mining, communication, and trade, and in banking, there are physical redistribution of the means of production. It is literally quite inconceivable. We get instead a desire for the division of property rights while preserving the unity of the industry or enterprise. To divide in the simple way would be at best a method of abolishing for the moment the inequality of the distribution of income and poverty. But after a short time, some would have squandered their shares, and others would have enriched themselves by acquiring the shares of the less economically efficient. Consequently, there would have to be consistent redistribution, which would simply serve to reward frivolity and waste. In short, every form of uneconomic behavior. There will be no stimulus to economy if the industrious and the thrifty are constantly compelled to hand over the fruits of their own industry and thrift to the lazy and extravagant. Yet even this result, temporary achievements of equality of income and property, could not be accomplished by syndicalization. For syndicalization is by no means the same for all workers. The value of the means of production, different branches of production are not proportional to the number of workers employed. It is unnecessary to elaborate the fact that there are products which involve more of the productive factor, labor, and less of the productive factor nature. Even a division of the means of production at the historical commencement of all human production would have led to inequality, much more so if these means were syndicalized at a highly progressive stage of capital accumulation, in which not only natural factors of production but produced means of production are divided, the values of these shares falling to individual workers. In a redistribution of this kind would be very different. Some would obtain more, the others less, and as a result, some would would draw a larger income from the property, unearned income, than others. Syndicalization is no way a means of achieving equality of income. It abolishes the existing inequality of income and property and replaces it by another. It may be of the syndicalistic inequality. Is regarded as more just than that of the capitalistic order, but no regard is more just than that of the but on this point of science can give no judgment. That's what I meant to say. I meant to read out. Sorry. If syndicalist reform is not to mean more than the mere redistribution of productive goods, then it cannot allow the property arrangements of capitalism to persist in regard to the means of production. It must withdraw productive goods from the market. Individual citizens must not dispose of their shares in the means of production, which are allowed to them, for under syndicalism these are bound up with the person of the owner, in a much closer way than is the case in the liberal society. How in different circumstances they may be separated from the person can be regulated in various ways. The naive logic of the advocates of syndicalism assumes without any further ado a completely stationary condition of society. And pays no attention to the problem of how the system will adapt itself to changes of economic condition. If we assume that no changes occur in the methods of production, in the relation of supply and demand, in technique or in population, then everything seems to be quite in order. Each worker only has one child and departs out of this world at the moment his successor and sole heir becomes capable of work. The son promptly steps into his place. We can perhaps assume that a change of occupation, a transfer from one branch of production to another, or from independent undertaken to another, by a voluntary simultaneous exchange of positions and shares in the means of production, would be permitted. But for the rest, the syndicalist state of society necessarily assumes a strictly imposed caste system and the complete end of all changes in industry and therefore in life. The mere death of a childless citizen disturbs it and opens up problems which are quite insoluble within the logic of the system. In the syndicalist society, the income of a citizen is made up of the yield from his portion of property and of the wages from his labor. The shares in the property and the means of production can be freely inherited. then in very short time differences in property holding will arise, even if no changes occur among the living. Even if at the beginning of the syndicalist era of the separation of the worker, if at the, from the means of production is overcome, so that every citizen is an entrepreneur as well as a worker in his own undertaking, it may so happen that later on citizens who will not belong to a particular undertaking inherit shares in it. This would very quickly drive the syndicalist society into a separation of labor and property without the advantages of the capitalist order society. Every economic change immediately creates problems which syndicalism would inevitably be wrecked. It changes in the direction and extent of demand or the technique of production. Cause changes in the organization of the industry which require the transfer of workers from one concern to another, or from one branch of production to another. The question immediately arises, what is to be done with the shares of these workers in the means of production? Should the workers and their heirs keep the shares in the industries to which they happen to belong at the actual time of syndicalization and enter new industries, simple workers' wages, without being allowed to draw any part of the property income? Or should they lose their share in leaving industry and in return receive a share per head equal to that possessed by the workers already occupied in a new industry? Either solution would quickly violate the principle of syndicalism. If in addition men were permitted to dispose of their shares, conditions would gradually return to the state prevailing before the reform. But if the worker on his departure from industry loses his share on entering another industry, well, his share in that, those workers who stood to lose by the change would naturally oppose energetically every change in production. The introduction of a process making for greater productivity of labor would be resisted if it displaced workers, or might displace them. On the other hand, the workers in an undertaking or branch of industry would oppose any development by introduction of new workers if it threatened to reduce their income from property. In short, syndicalism would make every change in production practically impossible. Sorry. As an aim, syndicalism is so absurd that, speaking generally, it has not found any advocates who dared write openly and clearly in its favor. Those who have dealt with it under the name of co-partnership have never thought out its problems. Syndicalism has never been anything else. Yeah. There would be no question of economic progress. I meant to say that. Where it existed, there would be no question of economic progress. As an aim, syndicalism is so absurd that, speaking generally, it has not found any advocates who dared to write openly and clearly in its favor. Those who have dealt with it under the name of co-partnership have never thought out its problems. Syndicalism has never been anything else than the idea of plundering hordes. And it is under the pseudo-socialist system concepts in the book by Mises. That is a series of rebuttals based on the wordings of Ludwig von Mises himself. Basically, if you were under the system, technological innovation could harm it. Somebody dying could harm the system. Somebody trying to leave to do something else could fuck this system a new ass. It's doomed to fail in so many angles. You can have labor unions as long as they're flexible and go from one type of business interest and field to another if it's out if the what it used to be under has been outcompeted more effectively, and so on and so forth, and follows the laws as everybody else. But state propping up and shit needs to stop, and they have to return to their older, more effective ways if these said unions are to survive. Syndicates can voluntarily form in common interest of shit as long as they don't corporatize. Guilds, as long as they have this ladder of craftsmen of a certain field or workers of a certain field, and not string pullers. And you also use a. I mean, there's a ways of doing the shit tremendously. I hope this I hope this does open your eyes to the idea of syndicalism. And even though a brilliant-minded person in many other areas, certainly not when it comes to socio-political and economic areas of interest, to say the least, when it comes to the advocacy of such a system by such an individual like Noam Chomsky. I hope I at least did maybe semi satisfactory in the response to the alternative to capitalism, which is a core of his majority of his ideals. Plus, this is a root of his political ideas. This very core foundation of his socio-economic political ideas. I agree with him on many things, but when it comes to his contributions and when he talks about the instruments of power in the corporate systems and whatnot, of course. But his idea of an answer to them all, I certainly do not. And any intellectually honest, competent economist would not either. Hope you enjoyed. If not, let me know. Give me constructive criticism, thumbs up, do whatever. I will see you later. Take care. I'm sorry for the yawning. I've been up for about 4 or 5 hours. I will stay up all through the night filming and refilming. Sorry about the yawning. I will, because that's the reasoning. So, take care of yourselves. I will link you references in the description below when I get the chance. I get some shut-eye. Peace.